Hello, my name is Kimberly McLaughlin Smith. I am a learning and talent development specialist in the HR department at UNC Wilmington. And today I'm here to talk to you about a growing conversation in the workplace, generational awareness, and how to navigate generational differences, because they do arise and they're not always easily identified as such. So we know that research is telling us that anywhere from 4 to 6 and growing generations are coexisting in workplaces all over the country. And that brings about interactions that are sometimes rooted in what feels like conflict, but really are generational misunderstandings. And so the information inside this snippet of a much longer presentation, they're designed to help you navigate that terrain in a better way. Up next, we have an intro video that gives a bit of whimsy, but also some foundational information on several of the generations that could be in the workplace from the point of view of people who are actually part of those generations. I hope you enjoy it.
What do you think is special about your generation?
What defines my generation?
What's a generation?
Millennials love Doug, and I'm I was too old for Doug. I liked Muppet Babies, things like that.
Most of the kids knows how to use electronics a lot better than most of the adults do.
It's pretty cool. Not like 80s or something where my mom was born, where the telephones are hooked onto a wall.
You know, I used to write letters to my grandparents.
We used to go outside and play flashlight tag.
We learned about people's lives through social media.
We tend to perform everything.
I was born into a much simpler, non-digital kind of world.
I didn't have a TV in my house till I was 15, 16 years old.
I remember, a tape deck in my car when I was 16.
I don't have to bust out a Thomas Guide anymore to, go to my next restaurant destination.
Instead of having to write a letter and then send it through to mail and then have it come maybe 3 days after, we were able to have friends that are so far away and be in touch with them all the time.
My generation is defined as kind of being selfish.
There's the can-do spirit of millennials, and then there's the jadedness of Generation X, and I feel like I have both of those in me all the time, kind of fighting each other.
We were just like a glut of all of the families that came back together after the war.
I think my generation was one of the first ones where our parents told us we could do whatever we want.
We have an overwhelming sense of self-importance.
I think we're a very self-aware generation.
A lot more people starting their own businesses.
There's a lot more creativity in our generation.
We're bringing new life to different problems, and we're bringing a new perspective.
Really trying to break the glass ceiling, especially for women.
We're kind of the ask for more generation.
We have the privilege to pursue our dreams and our desires in a way that our parents didn't have.
People who were ambitious, who were hardworking, just who wanted a good life, and they didn't mind working to achieve that.
We had hope and thought we could make a better world.
I think we stand up for what we believe in. We're all for that change.
This sense of agency, kind of a healthy disregard for the impossible.
Everything changed with my generation. They just took a look at the world in a new way and just refused to accept what people thought was acceptable for a long time, whether it was what color someone is, what a woman's role is. I think my generation was the greatest generation. I really do. Our first generation of discussion today is the baby boomer generation, born from 1946 to 1964. Now, we call them the baby boomers because there was a baby boom after the war. Several kids were born, people missed each other, and families grew. And with that in mind, this nickname was attached to that population. Some of their traits, and these are cultural norms, not necessarily hard and fast rules. So there are, of course, exceptions to the rules. They're team-oriented, very connected to the team. They value relationship building, which makes sense because of that first trait of team-oriented, and agency loyal. This is the population that gave us the phrases company girl, or company guy, really committed to the institutions and organizations that they serve. Some important tips to know about working with this population is they desire to provide mentorship because of their longevity in the workplace. They are thought partners. In their minds, they see themselves as thought partners, and they love to give their input because of that institutional knowledge. Recognition for time invested into that organization is important, not only by way of awards and those kinds of recognition, but to be called on and again utilized for what they know and what they bring to the table. And opportunities for professional development are still important to the baby boomers. So they do have and come with that institutional knowledge, but they also have the desire to be lifelong learners and grow and develop alongside their counterparts in other generations. Next up is Generation X, the forgotten generation. They call us that because we were latchkey kids. The first kids where moms actually went out into the workforce and kids got home alone and they had a lot more responsibility earlier in life. Seems as though they were forgotten, but really just given more autonomy and independence. And you'll see that in the traits that we may display in the workplace. I am a Generation Xer, and again, born 1965 to 1980. So if you are born in that bracket, you are a Generation Xer indeed. The traits. Lots of independence is not a requirement, but it helps you get the best out of your Generation X employees. So give them the charge and allow them the autonomy, which is the next trait, to go away and work on it. And that is because loose engagement is very important to Generation Xers. Not that they are separate and apart and not team-oriented, but they do their best work autonomously in general. Of course, again, exceptions to every rule. Tips for working with Generation Xers. Encourage that autonomy. Make them know that you trust their work and their judgment, and that even if you didn't hire them, you trust that expertise and can make room for them to show up in that. Provide flexibility in terms of scheduling as much as possible. The traditional 9 to 5 is not always something that the average Generation Xer can wrap their minds around, sitting at a desk without wiggle room or the freedom to move and think and refresh. That flexibility really helps quite a bit in the workplace with your Generation X employees. And knowledge of their contributions. So acknowledgement, again, like the baby boomers, and I think that's a human trait. Everyone wants to be acknowledged. The acknowledgement that Xers like to have is so that while they need the autonomy, you see that having given them the autonomy, they show up in a stellar way in the workplace. So more than for the accolade, it's, I see that you don't need that much oversight, and I appreciate that trait, and I can work with you on giving you the flexibility that you need. So there's a means to an end, if you will, behind that thought process for the Generation X employee. Next up, we have the millennials, born 1981 to 1996. They are known as the me generation because they were the first generation to be concerned with work-life balance. They thought about themselves and how they wanted to intermingle in the workplace, and generations before them were typically happy to have employment, so the work-life balance wasn't even a conversation. But yes, they are also the generation that we term with the gold ribbons and such. So the me comes in. Everybody made the team starting in that generation when those young folks were coming of age. There were no losers. Everybody made the team. There were 11th place ribbons and all of that. So it kind of helped them develop the me lens through which they see themselves. And so here we are with traits that may show up in the workplace. So they will talk to you about work-life balance and a need for that. They can be very inventive and innovative. One of the things I always like to bring up is by the time they were coming of age in the millennial generation, jobs in the workforce were really hard to find and sparse. And so they not only created jobs, but they created entities and institutions, and they created industries. So we have Airbnbs and Lyft and Uber. thanks to the auspices and the great minds of the millennial thinkers. So they are thinking outside the box, and they're known for that as well. And one-on-one time versus team time. They are very individualistic in terms of how they want to grow and develop in the workplace. So they can be very collective in building consensus, but they do want the autonomy to kind of work with someone one-on-one and gain that growth and development that they need to further their own personal growth and development in the workplace, separate from the team, while still being great team players. Tips for working with millennials: that one-on-one engagement with leadership so that their skills and the growth thereof can be seen is very important. Perform to expectations. This is a generation that what you input, you will get in the output. Be very clear and precise as to what it is that you're looking for, and they are producers to the letter often. Properly acknowledge and reward them. Different from generations before them, they want to be recognized so that when the next opportunity to grow within the organization comes, they are first and foremost in your mind based on how you have acknowledged their input and their contributions to the team. And freedom to think outside the box, because again, Lyft, Uber, Airbnb, there were things that were similar to that, but they stepped a little further out of the box and grew those notions into industries that didn't really exist prior to that. Up next, we have our Gen Z, one of the most unique cohorts ever. Yes, so born 1997 to 2012. They are the loneliest generation. Whenever I ask why we call them the loneliest generation, people are not pressed for an answer. It is because, yes, of the devices and all of the technology that comes with being part of this particular generational cohort. They spend a lot of time, as to what we see alone, they feel fully engaged and surrounded by their peers on these devices. But we've chosen to label them as the loneliest generation, though they don't see themselves as such. Traits of Generation Z. Very tech savvy. That's not rocket science. They are almost out of the womb onto a device, just based on our culture as it is in their time of coming of age. Shrewd consumers. They do a lot of research on those devices. They're not just wasting time. Oftentimes we think that they are, but they're doing a lot of research and a lot of data collecting and a lot of consulting with each other on how to spend their dollars, whether they're working for those dollars or it's an allowance. They spend their money on good technology and other things that they have access to that generations before them did not. So they want to make sure those dollars are well spent, and they have the apparatus to get the research done and make those decisions with that in mind. And digital natives, that sounds redundant, but they really are, and they are our ticket and our fuel into the future with their knowledge as it grows on the digital age that we are in. Tips for working with Generation Z. They want the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues far and near and far. Of course, by way of their savvy with technology. They do that in work and play. They need for their work to align with their interests and with their values. It gives them a deeper sense of purpose, and purpose in their work is something that this generation really needs and wants to have. It has to matter. It can't just be a punch in and a punch out position. They're not designed that way. And finally, opportunities to share new knowledge, because the knowledge comes to them so rapidly and fluidly. They are always ready to share what they've learned. And generally, it is all brand spanking new because they have that access and that affinity to gaining that new knowledge by way of their digital knowledge and ability to navigate those spaces very easily. Now, I have given you a very broad brushstroke, as I said in the beginning, about just a few of the generations that are in the workplace. Research tells us that in a very short time, we'll be working with as many as 7 generations in the workplace. So it behooves us to gain this knowledge as to how to navigate this space in a better way so that we can all coexist harmoniously. And I have one more thought for you. If you're interested in more programming on this topic or others, contact UNCW's Office of Continuing and Professional Education by way of the website you see on screen. Thank you for your time, and I hope this gives you an idea as to what we are seeing in the workplace today as it relates to generational awareness.